Peter, just I'm curious to go back to how you started collecting. I believe you started collecting art in college.
Yes, I was at the University of Colorado, and that's when I started collecting, yes.
How did that happen? Not often the college students start collecting art.
Actually, my father was from Europe, and he, was a small collector of French Rococo paintings, and I was very much interested in sports, and he didn't really care for sports that much. I mean, in terms of, he looked to me as, I should be getting an education and not worrying about playing ball all the time. And he, so we didn't have that in common, and we shared the his interest in collecting art. And so probably from the age of about 11 or 12 years old, I kind of hung around with him and watched him collect, and went to museums with him a lot, and went to places like the Frick and the Metropolitan, and not just once a year, but he would kind of drag me there 5 or 6 times a year. So
you're a college student at UC in Boulder, right?
At the University of Colorado in Boulder.
Yeah. There isn't a lot of art to buy at least there wasn't back then in Boulder. What did you buy first, and how did you?
Well, actually, for me, somehow or other, I found the art to buy. There was a teacher there that I was very much interested in his work. His name was Sampson. His last name was Sampson, and I kind of put together a collection of his work, which I had where I lived in Colorado, and then after school, like in the summer times, I'd be in New York, and then I started getting interested in the artists that were in New York, and of course met Leo Castelli, and I guess the first person to really turn me on to the New York school was Bruno Bischofberger from Switzerland, who was a friend of mine from the time I was 14 years old. So he is largely responsible for my keen interest in contemporary art. That's basically how it started.
So Dan, you went to RISD, right?
Yeah.
Around School of Design?
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear about your early days in New York, post-RISD. Things, as far as I understand, got moving for you pretty quickly in terms of shows and exhibitions and sales and stuff like that. How did that come about?
I guess there's kind of a story. There was a lot of serendipity, I guess, but I grew up with Ryan McGinley, so he went to Parsons actually, and
you guys grew up together in New Jersey?
Yeah, we grew up together in New Jersey. Since I was like 13, I knew him, and so when I was still in school, I would visit him, and one of our close friends was dating Maribel Martin, Bryce's daughter, and she eventually became my art dealer. But we were just kids out in the streets, and she would talk about wanting to be a gallerist, and I would talk about wanting to be an artist. And I guess the thing that ended up kind of connecting things, which was just a weird chance thing, was Jane Kaplowitz, who's a friend of mine also. This is like a lot of like weird names, but I guess it's an appropriate place to tell a story like this. Who's Robert Rosenblum's wife, or was taking her son to visit RISD and saw my work, and I guess described my work while she was at the Martin's house, and Maribel overheard it and connected the dots. And I think through that like confidence in Jane's taste, asked me to do a show with them. So, but regardless, anyways, like before I graduated RISD, we'd already planned that, and I don't know. I guess that's that story.
So, Peter, how did you first get interested in Dan's work?
Actually, I got interested in Dan's work, and Dan, amongst other artists that were of the same approximate age and period of Dan, probably about 7 years ago, I first wandered into to a gallery in Soho, Jeffrey Deitch's gallery, and I saw this work, just caught my eye, and I just thought it was exceptional. It was called Dash's Wall, and today's one of my favorite works. It's basically a wall from where they lived, and kind of collaged images of what was on the wall and what Dash kind of created there. And Dan sort of visually understood how great it was, and then redid that wall in a piece. And so I asked about it, and I asked if it might come for available. And Jeffrey Deitch said that he'd already sold it. I didn't know who he sold it to, but then later, years later, I found out through the Gagosian Gallery that it was actually Charles Saatchi that had the work, and that he had given it to Sam and Larry to resell, and so I had the opportunity to buy it. So that was really my first. That wasn't my first purchase of his work, but it was my first time that I connected with his work.
So in general,
There it is in the last slide. If you go back, that's Dash's Wall.
in general, as a collector, is that how you tend to discover artists or form a relationship with artists? Is it through exhibitions, or is there also word of mouth, or do you ever work with an advisor?
Maybe I should, but I don't. And I think that I just have kind of my own formula, where I just go out and look a lot, and I go and look at museums a lot, and I read a lot, and I go and see things, and then I kind of come back and do my, my visual research either on the computer or through books, and talk to people that I, respect, and it's kind of the way the foundation started. It was really just a process,
Just something that Peter made me think of talking about Dash's Wall, because maybe my answer was incomplete. That was really just the story of how I got my first show scheduled, but much more important than that, I think, was really, and I think my friends and I created our own notoriety. It had nothing to do with those coincidences. That was really just a show that more or less went overlooked, but really mine and Ryan's relationship, and then the friendships that we made in the years, kind of around the 2000s, with Dash and Nate and things like that. I think us just believing in ourselves, believing in each other, and really being really, really committed to our own work, and our own development as a whole group was really the kind of most influential, and our kind of becoming recognized. So
Just wanted to circle back to you, Peter, talking about how you discover work or how you sort of make the decision to collect something. And you were talking about seeing a lot of exhibitions and going to museums and reading a lot. You started collecting before the era of the art fair. I'm wondering what your take is on art fairs. If they're useful to you.
That's an interesting question. I was at the first Basel Art Fair, and I think it was 1973 or what was it, Tony? 73 or 74 or 75, and I really didn't like it. I mean, I thought it was a very odd way to look at paintings and sculpture. It looked kind of like a convention sort of atmosphere, and I really didn't really care for it. But today I really like it, because I think that if it's a good art fair, there's a lot that you can see. And yes, it's not the perfect way to see it, but hopefully by the time you get to one, or you go to 5 or 6 of them, you perfect your eye to at least appreciate something what you see. You're not seeing it in the best of condition because it's all different periods of art that are, cluttering the walls, but you have a different way of looking at it. You're kind of spotting something that really catches your eye, that might give you a remembrance of a visual thing that you saw in the past that gets your attention. And it's like, the best way I could explain it is, it's sort of like a person who, goes into an antique store. I mean, they go in for the first time, they get kind of dizzy with all the, older things that you see, and it's hard to focus. But if you do it for 4 or 5 years, or 3 or 4 years, you get to the point where you can go into an antique store and see a little object on a shelf in the distance, because you train your eye to be able to spot things. And so it's like anything else. It's something you perfect, and it's exercise, for your eyes. So that's basically it.
Dan, do you have any thoughts on art fairs? You ever been to one?
I've been to one, yeah. I don't know if I have any great insights on art fairs, honestly. I save my answers for other questions.
How hard is it?
No, I like, it's a part of, how work gets seen. It's a part of how work gets around. It's some of my first works were seen at art fairs. Early on, I wasn't, I'd show anybody anything anywhere, I just wanted people to look at my art. And I still do, I just want people to look at my art. So now, I have more precise kind of venues, more appropriate venues, places where I have a little more control over exactly how the work is experienced. But especially early on, it was just as exciting for me. To put something in front of somebody was exciting for me. And it's a marketplace. It's a place just for buying and selling. It's not a place for deep thought. I don't know if museums are a place for deep thought, unfortunately. And it's really it's hard to find that space and time anywhere, and it's really, we do it where we choose to. So I've had some of my kind of most intimate moments with artworks in fairs, and sometimes it's in a studio visit, and sometimes it's in a museum. It's a part of the art world, and it's a part of how curators work and collectors work, and really, I remember after my first show, my first show was 4 paintings, and I worked on them for 2 years. And I remember pricing them and selling them was devastating for me, because there was no price that would have done them justice to me, And there was no person that could have loved them as much as I did, And I remember I didn't see it coming, but basically once the price tag was on them and there was any discussion of sale, I was heartbroken. And watching this my creation turn into a commodity, And anyways, I think I eventually understood, I had to pay the bills, and it was it still is the best way for me to do that. But also, it's there's so many problems with the art world. There's so many problems with the world, and I've chosen, I think the way I could be most influential and really be most positive and productive to the world around me is through making my art. I'm staying focused on that, and hopefully there'll be some people more in Peter's position, or in in some gallerists or different kinds of collectors or people like that who will really have a positive impact on kind of shaping the way art is shown and sold and collected and all these things. People who really care about the work. Somebody like Peter who's really devoted to the work, I think, can have an impact on that. But for me, I'm more just focused on kind of making work. I like looking at work, but I don't spend too much time worrying about the mechanisms of the art world, because it just distracts me. And it's not that much different than how the world works on in every kind of area of it,
So you've got a big exhibition up now at the Brant Foundation Art Study Center, major retrospective of your work. I'm really curious to hear how it's been like for you two working together and building this exhibition.
Well, it's really, from show to show, it kind of changes and it's different. But I must say, all the artists that I've worked with so far have been really great to work with, the ones that are alive. And originally this foundation was supposed to be built, and it was supposed to be a foundation to have a permanent installation of Andy Warhol's late works, and that was its original intent. But then talking to a friend of mine who's here tonight, Tony Shafrazi, one of my very close friends, kind of, convinced me, I really should be doing something else that's more current and changing and is more reflective of what collecting really is to us. And so I came up with this, with this formula of really having 2 shows a year and artists that are, even if it's a group show, or shown in depth, and then comes from our collection, or we borrow things. In the case of Dan's show, we borrowed quite a few things, and our next show coming up, we'll also be borrowing some things. And I think the artists, sense that the people that are involved in the foundation really care about the work, and that sets the stage for a working relationship that has worked very well for us. Our shows have, gotten reviewed very well, which is amazing to me, because most anything I've ever done in my life has not gotten reviewed well. But in this particular case, I think that people realize that there's a passion involved here, both on the side of the institution, the collector, the artist, and I think you feel it when you go there, and it's very friendly towards the artist and very friendly also towards the viewer and to children, and I'm very proud of it. And I think that working with Dan, I must say that Dan was probably the hardest working artist of the artists that we have shown there. They've all worked really hard, but Dan was there like all the time, and which made me be there all the time as well. So we kind of supported one another there, and it turned out to be a great show. But he really put every effort into making it such.
Had you two met before you decided to do the show?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had met, and we had gotten to develop a kind of relationship over a year or two, slowly, spending more and more time together leading up to the show. To be honest, in the year leading up to it, I actually had a lot of anxiety about, from a distance, it seemed like a strain, like a kind of overly, more complex kind of show to work through than usual. This is just like what it seemed like to me, because doing it with a collector, there's an artist, there's many years of work, there's a gallery who introduced us, and in fact, it was an amazing learning experience. Actually, it was one of the easier shows that I've installed. And actually, just speaking to what Peter had talked about, it was actually the one that was most out of the marketplace, which maybe my thinking was the opposite, since I was doing it with a collector. But really, I work with a lot of different people creating art and installing art, and a lot of different kind of hands and a lot of different minds touch my work, and it's a part of my process that I'm very kind of sensitive to and open to and inspired by. And but really, I never could have imagined a collector being so influential in any part of the process. And really, what I've learned working with all the different people that I've worked with is that and really what started with an understanding inside of myself is that it's my own faith in the work that drives the work. And when I find people that have the same intensity of faith in my work as I do, they're able to like influence it, you know, because they really believe in it. And but as opposed to a curator who might have like more of an ego to satisfy in the process, Peter really just had like a pure faith in my work that's not that much different than my own. Or, I mean, it's a totally different twist on it, but it's just as kind of like deep and true as my own. You know, he has total confidence in me as an artist, not just in things that I've made or in things that he owns. And I think something that had the biggest impact on this I really feel like this is by far my most successful kind of show. And it gave me an opportunity to kind of connect a lot of the dots for a lot of people, which I haven't had before. But Peter really allowed me to, you know, basically there were a couple pieces in the show that he bought at a time where the pieces weren't like fully developed, and he saw a potential in them, and gave me a second opportunity to rework them in this place and really bring them to a kind of conclusive state.
Which pieces were those, I may ask?
Well, the large kind of tumbleweed, I call it. It's titled Infinite Jest. It's the large kind of accumulation of scrap metals and trash, and there's live birds that live in it. That's in the main space. You know, it was kind of like a sketch almost when he first saw it and acquired it. And it was really only in his space that, like, although it'll take different forms in the future, you know, it can change shapes, there's like a philosophy that kind of like is integral to it now that wasn't there before. And it was really, I think it's just like he has that, he's put his confidence in me as an artist, you know, in general, my process, and like more of the fundamental kind of ideas behind how I work. And also there's another thing of kind of trash bicycles that I'm actually still working on, Peter. So, not done yet. But
Drill down for me a little bit on that philosophy that you were able to draw out as you went back to that tumbleweed piece. Infinite Jest?
Yeah, Infinite Jest. Well, I mean, it's a little bit, I guess what I'm talking about is like the philosophies are kind of like technical ways of how it could be, you know, installed over, you know, in the future with or without me.
So I asked him for a piece that would look good in my apartment in New York, and that's what I got.
Right, we're gonna jam it in there.
I don't think so.
But you know, it was it's a lot of material to play with, you know, and you need a lot of big machines, and moving it around and putting it together the first time is just like overwhelming, you know. And I didn't, you know, it's kind of, I mean, to talk about it is kind of ridiculous because it's a pile of trash, you know, and like it was a pile of trash last time and it's a pile of trash this time. But I mean, the big difference is it. Yeah, I don't really know. When I don't know how to put it into words, but the aesthetics of it are a little different. I took out basically before. It was much less severe before. It was almost. It was almost like a Christmas tree, like, or something like that. There were like little things kind of placed around these.
So what happened? This was originally exhibited at Gavin Brown's house in Harlem, and it was smaller. It was about half the size, and Dan created, working with the same piece, changed the work from what it was. And it always, you don't see, there are birds that live in this piece, there are canaries that live in this piece, and which are very soft, you know, make the piece very soft in a way, and in contrast to the junk. And it's a very powerful piece. I urge you to go see it if you get a chance. It's really a wonderful work of art.
Yeah, it was the physicality of the piece. Was able to I was able to be much more ambitious about it with Peter. We just had the tools, we had the people. You know, I built it the first time with 2 other people, and this time we built it with like 10 guys and four giant machines. So it's really like a kind of technical thing, but I was able to literally shape it, like sculpt it like clay in a way that I wasn't before because I didn't have the right tools. And I didn't even know that it could get this good, and he kind of saw it and understood that I could elaborate on it. So it was really just that kind of confidence. I think most collectors would be like, no, what do you mean change it? So.
You asked if we knew each other. He and I went riding together, horseback riding together. He paints better than he rides.
On your polo ponies?
Just on horses.
Yeah, I almost died. Hey, he has, I don't even know how many horses he has, and I assume he has as many pairs of riding boots, but there wasn't one that fit me, and he had to duct tape me into these really beautiful riding boots, and I was like, oh, but no, it wasn't a good experience.
So Peter, you were saying how this is one of the first things you've done that it's been well reviewed. I actually read a terrific review by Barry Schwabsky in Art Forum of this show just today. In preparing for this talk, I read over some of the press, and your work has provoked some pretty mixed reactions over the years, and that for me raises a larger question. And there a lot of students in the audience, they're constantly getting feedback on their work from faculty and from their peers, and often it's mixed messages. You hear 3 different things from 3 different people. How have you dealt with the kind of whiplash experience of getting a scathing review in the Times while your work is being snapped up in the marketplace?
Well, I mean, like I said, well, I've always dealt with criticism. I was a bad student, and it always kind of, I understand this to be, kind of a personal search. This is about me exploring my soul or my inner truths, and it's about me making discoveries in invisible worlds. These things aren't clear cut at all. And what's occurring to me right now is I had one teacher, this guy Dyke Blair, who was really influential on me. He was he got me through school. I definitely wouldn't have gotten through school without him. He's the one person that kind of at least understood what I was trying to do, but he always said art is long, and historically a lot of artists aren't championed, the second that their work is, made. And I understood that a struggle and defiance is kind of a part of my job description, and it's, I have a lot of thoughts about it. I guess the review that you mentioned is definitely the first positive review the first positive words that have ever been written down about me. No, but in that kind of context, in a kind of formal review context, I think in a magazine or arts newspaper, I haven't had too much support, and I'm almost proud of that, in a way, and so I don't.
So it's fueled you in a way.
Yeah, it's fueled me in a way, but the bottom line is again, it's as long as I believe in this thing, it's not supposed to make sense right away. It's supposed to kind of, enter the world and kind of seep in slowly.
Basically, I think people have a tendency of overrating reviews. I personally don't read reviews. I never have, and probably never will. I just feel that I publish them, but I don't read them. And the reason that I don't read them is because I don't like to go to a show and have something in my mind that's going to influence me in any way about the show. I just like to bump into it and make my own, judgment. and that judgment could be one way one day, and 2 years later I could be completely on the opposite side of the street, because I've learned more about that artist and didn't see it at the beginning. I mean, you don't always see it at the very beginning. You usually don't see it at all at the beginning. And I feel that we ask these reviewers to cover the waterfront with so many different artists, and it's not like one person who's a collector who has collected a certain artist's work over a long period of time and he understands the work. And a lot of these reviewers, they have to cover hundreds of artists. They cover the waterfront, and they can't always write with the intensity that they might or should do if they were more knowledgeable about the work. So as a viewer of the work, I think you can read it after you go see it. If you think that, if it tells you something that you didn't, see, or suggests something that you didn't know. But I just generally feel that it's overrated, and that we, should learn how to make our own judgment as well, and then read somebody else's judgment. It's like, I feel very strongly about that. I think that so many great artists never got reviewed well. And Andy Warhol would be one of those artists. I don't think there's...
You doubled down on Warhol at the time when his work was not in favor.
Well,
in terms of collecting more deeply.
He doubled down in a casino. I don't know if he can double down on an artist,
That's a
but...
wrong metaphor, but you collected his work more deeply late in his career, correct?
Yeah, I've always collected his work deeply, because I knew him very well, and we were business partners, and we social friends, and so I was very much involved. But first I was interested in his work before I got to know him, and he just never got good reviews. I think the only show that really got reviewed kind of decently was the Brillo boxes, at Eleanor Ward's gallery. He just generally didn't get good reviews. Damien Hirst never got good reviews. There are many really important artists that didn't get reviewed well.
Another thing that I'd say that's been kind of helpful, over the years and kind of pushing through. Early on, you could have confidence in your work all on your own and kind of just push through, but that could only go on for so long before like negativity kind of just gets you down. And so, finding different people, collectors, you mentioned like my work was selling along throughout those years, but really like there's a few collectors that have really kind of helped me with dialogue, kind of getting through that stuff, but really artists, is like a much bigger part of the last 10 years. And so as long as I kind of have my peers and some of my, kind of some artists who are more influential even over, support, it really makes so much of a difference. And, that I'm in that community, I think, has been really helpful.
And also, take an artist like Jean-Michel Basquiat, one of the really great painters of our time. He didn't get good reviews. People thought it was hype and thought it was, they just wouldn't give him the credit that he really deserved. Brilliant painter. Nothing not to like. But that's the way it went down in the art world. I mean, it just, they're like anything, they're flavors of the day. And some years they gravitate towards one group of artists or school of artists, and and if you sit there and say, well, I know this is good because the museums are doing this, they're not usually right either. So, if they were so right, then they would have all the best pop art in the world, because it was done right here in New York. They had very little, up until 10 years ago, they had very little of it.
Sometimes it seems like the curators and critics are one school of fish and collectors are another school of fish, and they often swim in opposite directions. So you've produced a lot of films, Peter.
Not a lot, but
6 of them, I think, right?
I just finished my 6th film, which I did with a friend, Tommy Lee Jones, and he directed it, and he's the main actor, and it's called Homesman. It was in the Cannes Film Festival and the Telluride Film Festival, and it's going to be in the Hamptons Film Festival, and it's with Hilary Swank and Meryl Streep, and it's got John Lithgow, Haley Steinfeld. It's a really good film about, you know, women in the 1850s in the West and how difficult it was to settle the West.
The film that I'm most curious about, though, is Andy Warhol's Bad.
Oh, yeah. It was pretty bad. It was a film that I did with Andy. It was actually, you know, in terms of like critics and everything, I produced the film, and I remember the first screening, I walked out of it. I thought it was so bad. When they killed the golden retriever in the film, I'm a big fan of golden retrievers. I walked out. But yeah, I did L'Amour with Andy, and I did Bad. Bad has become kind of a cult film, but.
What was your role? I mean, producer can mean many things.
No, I was there when they made the film, and I was there when they made L'Amour in Paris. I was just basically, you know, they were low-budget films that Andy and Fred Hughes and Paul Marcy, you know, developed, and I was, you know, publishing Interview magazine, and I went in on the films.
So, Dan, I'm wondering, sort of just building off of my last question about how you deal with mixed feedback, if you would have any advice for my students, 64 of whom are sitting in the audience here.
Maybe there'll be some more specific questions that I'd be happy to answer after I take a crack at it. But you know, I mean, it's like, it sounds so corny, but it's just like, you know, it's just like you have to believe in yourself, believe in like what you want to make, and that's like there's nothing else that's relevant, you know, until it's out of your hands. You know what I mean? And so while it's in your hands, is just you know, it's like trust your feelings, you know, and I don't really know. I honestly think that that's all that matters. I wish it wasn't. I wish that wasn't what I said, but.
I'll take your advice. I'd love to hear some questions from our audience.
I don't know. I don't know who you're talking about, but I would disagree, I guess. But I'm happy. Like, it sounds like a legitimate conversation. It's just like I think, like, I'd say what made us notorious was like something that like kind of took place before 2008, before 2007 even, and there was nobody involved at that point. You know, like there was no money, I guess is what you're talking about, or people with power that were involved at all. It was just, we were just like getting high on the streets, and like I don't know who was pulling those strings, but so yeah. So the media has definitely shaped the audience, the public's perception of, I think, me and my friends. Yeah, without a doubt. And it's been like something I've been kind of battling for many years. It's been, you know, to kind of sorry, I like maybe misunderstood that first thing, but like, yeah, even to refocus my audience's attention back on the work is something I put like a lot of effort into, you know, because I think you know, that's the point, and a lot of other things became a distraction. I had never intended for them to be anything more than just like my personal life, my private lifestyle, you know, really. But I guess I was able to answer that first question because like I'm pretty happy with like my own trajectory at this point. There's nothing I would change. You know, I mean, I change things as like, you know, I'm constantly changing things, but there's nothing I'd rewrite, you know. and you know, some misconceptions like have kind of like enabled me to kind of make certain break through certain barriers, and you know, I'm trying to refocus things now, but yeah, I mean, this show really gave me an opportunity, I think, to kind of present my body of work in a way that I've never had before, and so you know, it was a really nice experience because of that. Like I mentioned before, a lot of relationships that I have that like I kind of have a deep trust and intimacy with. And you know, I've collected a lot of people who do a lot of different things, who have a lot of different expertises. Some of them who work in my studio, some of them who, you know, I work with outside of my studio, somebody like Peter who I'm in dialogue with, like my guy from my gallery, Sam over here, is somebody, you know, who I've been working with for a lot of years, you know, and I have conversations with all sorts of different people, and I kind of, but again, it's like there's certain people who have this kind of faith in my work that I relate to, and I find that dialogue to be the most potent, you know, and the most productive. You know, I'm a little a little more. I mean, my practice is constantly changing. You know, it always has been. I think I'm a little. I think as I have more experience, I'm a little more aware of exactly, you know, or maybe really it's like now I have the perspective to kind of see how certain things have transformed over the years, and you know, working outside of the city has had a big influence on a lot of things. There's a pretty like straightforward part to it though, where the studio that I always had basically is still in the city, and I always built sculptures in other people's studios, you know, in fabricators and woodworkers and metalworkers studios, and I got to a point where I couldn't take the sculpture to where I could take the painting to, because I wasn't there for all the mistakes, I wasn't there for all the lessons, and I would just check in on it, and I wasn't as connected to the work, you know, it wasn't as easy for me to have an influence over. So upstate was really to set up my own sculpture shop, which is what I did, but you know, really kind of tuning into that part of the process that's about mistake, chance, all these things that are less about my exact ambition for the piece or my vision for the piece, and more about the things that I see as the piece develops, I think, you know, and it's something I become more and more aware of, that kind of component in the work or in the process. Being out in the country, you know, and whatever lifestyle I'm living out there is really fed into that, you know, just being around nature, and, you know, I'm on a farm, so I'm around like a kind of like you know, a cycle of kind of growth and life and death that like it does feed into my work, I think, yeah. No, they're no different than anything else you're seeing in there. They're all unique sculptures. I mean, like we had they were like a last minute inclusion, and I think they really, you know, and I think Peter, not just there, but in a lot of places, really kind of like helped me fine tune the show. But they think we both kind of saw that they really helped articulate something at that last moment over there. But they're, you know, how they exist as works is in the show. There's one sculpture that's a chair that we make in my studio. That's like a remake of an old shaker kind of farm chair. And or maybe that one's actually like a Thonet chair, but anyways, they're just the remakes, and I think there's two glass. They're just they're blown, you know. They're all unique objects. So the two glass whoopee cushions in the chair are one sculpture, and then we kind of scattered around other whoopee cushions, which are each their own thing, I guess. Yeah. But they're all, they're all hand blown, and yeah, no, they're just their own objects, I guess.
I'm gonna ask the next question. I gave a talk recently in which I was asked a question that really bothered me. So I'm gonna ask it to you. I just, given an hour's talk, about an hour, and the student said, it's like the last question of the evening, he said, I dig your work and all, but what are you trying to say?
I want to talk to that girl in the back row again. No.
That's what prompted the question. I'm just curious. You talked kind of about how you.
Well. So I mean, I guess another big thing that like there's there may be I mean, a point I don't think is a part of like my ambition. It's not a part of my process. Like something any specific point. But things develop, as the work develops, like, and there are parts of me, and I'm following inspirations, so I don't have it all figured out when, like, let's say, like the whoopee cushions, where those started, they started out with me filling real whoopee cushions with, where they started out was I had found this cartoon online of a priest blowing up like an inflatable shaped as a god in a box that was shaped as like an old man with a beard and a robe in a box that said God on it. And I had it for years and I thought it was great. And I started redrawing it and elaborating on that, and the god would blow up, and then the god would turn real, and then the god would like smash the priest. And I don't know where, but like at some point while making those drawings, I started filling whoopee cushions with concrete, and somehow I mean, to do this thing, which I try to do in a lot of my work, this isn't specifically what I try to do, but it's a line that I try to ride where it's trying to take something that's like so insignificant, that's just so shitty, like in culture, that's like so low, and I'm trying to find or to create a stage where everything can exist on the same kind of plane. And so to kind of try to elevate something as junky as a whoopee cushion and simultaneously destroy its function, destroy like the only value that it has is in its like fart, like in that like minute, in that 10 seconds of a joke, and to try to say like I'm actually elevating this simultaneously to taking the function out of it. I mean, I'm always trying to take the point out of things, you know what I mean? There's supposed to be different experiences for different people, and so to have a point kind of kills any open-endedness of something. From there, so I started thinking about the whoopee cushions as like, these metaphors for the artist's breath, and I was thinking a lot about the priest blowing up the god, and I'm really just trying to going through my brain. And there's something about like almost that even kind of contradicts my own intention by putting the concrete in there. But then I kind of wanted to come back to it, and so I started making the glass whoopies, which were actually shaped by breath. So it's like a form sculpted by a breath. And so it's like I just follow a lead, and I trust my own process. And I trust where it's going to take me. And most of the things that people that are conversational about my work were never obvious as I was making it. It's something that sometimes I discover, at the end. Something with my candle paintings that I think like became really interesting that I wasn't tuned into at all was the fact that they're pictures of a table that a craftsman turned a wooden object into a live boy. They're like Geppetto's work table, which is, very, which I have a lot of, I relate to. That's what I do. I take inanimate objects and I put life into them. But it's not something that I at all was tuned into for the 7 years that I was painting those things, every day. I never it's just like, I just believed in it as an image. I thought that it had some power. And again, there's like, yeah, it's like it's an internal thing, and a big, like, I don't know where it's going, you know what I mean? I have to trust myself, and that's kind of what I was speaking about with the faith and a collector's faith. Or
it's also, it's also a question that kind of in a sense doesn't deserve an answer, the question that he asked you, because an artist is an artist, and anything that artist does is in some form art, if that's what his intention is. And there's so many people that will write about it and that create their own reasoning behind a work of art, that it doesn't, an artist doesn't have to answer what is he saying. I mean, certainly Andy Warhol never told you what he was saying. You could never get that out of him. He just, basically said that the meaning is on the surface of his paintings, and you think what you see.
I think it's interesting to see how artists choose not to answer that question.
It's also a question of, you see Dan's work and you see right away the playfulness, the intelligence that goes into the work, and that it is beautiful. Its range is so broad in terms of the different types of paintings and the way he goes about creating his work. It has such a range to it, and that I think everybody will see something different in that in that range.
I'm also, I think, not every artist, I think every artist differs, but I'm after like an emotional response more than an intellectual response too. And so for me to put it into words would almost, it would really just be kind of like taking a potential out of my own work,
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me in the work you're showing at the Gagosian right now, and some of the stuff I haven't been up to the study center yet, but some of the stuff you're showing now up in Greenwich, in the way you talk about your work, talking about the importance of believing in yourself, believing in the work, and having faith. There's a deep vein of spirituality in your practice.
Yeah, I think it's like all about what, it's invisible, what the I deal with real materials, but like most of the real kind of the potent parts of my work, the parts of my work that are really kind of touching an audience, like the real art, like is invisible. So spiritual, yeah, for sure.
That's a great question, really great question, because I think that sometimes one of the biggest disadvantages is to actually meet the artist and to know the artist, because it's like if you're, in a sense, you're putting together what you think is relevant to what our time is and what you're collecting, that, and you don't want I have a lot of friends that are artists, close friends that are artists, and I really separate what I think of the work and what I think of them as human beings. And generally for me, there are a lot of nice people that are artists because I'm friendly with a lot of artists. But I believe that sometimes knowing the artist too well can affect your opinion of the work, and then also when you're very friendly with them, if you feel it's going off at all in some way, or you feel he's in a group, in a bad position or a bad time of his life, or what do? You tell him, or it's a difficult position to be in, but I think generally a lot of great collectors have been friendly with artists. It's intellectually stimulating both ways, and because you're basically spending a lot of your time talking about the history of art, and a lot of my best friends are art dealers, and a museum person here and there, but I feel that that can be a disadvantage, especially if you hate the person, and you know that they're really great artists. I don't generally ask questions like that of what they mean. What are you trying to say here? Because to me, it's a visual experience, and I think it's an intellectual. It's like the great artist Mike Kelly once said that beauty is a socialized thing, which I totally believe in, and I feel is kind of the essence of, your visual appreciation of beauty. Because in my life, many of the things that I collected when I was very young that are certainly beautiful now, like Marilyn Monroe, were not considered beautiful in the 60s. When Andy did the portrait of Marilyn Monroe, it was like this photographic silkscreen, which was taboo at that time, that was covered with like paint to make it look like makeup. And it was garish, and it was loud, and it was just not beautiful. Today, we look at it like Mona Lisa. So I think, tastes change. People start to recognize younger artists as they develop, and then that becomes part of advertising and becomes part of a visual experience that you see day to day, and then that all of a sudden becomes beautiful. So that's what I think.
I collect a lot of my friends' art, is where I started. But I think my taste tends towards the weirder side of things. But it's all over the place. But I love living with work. I live with mostly my friends' work or other artists that I admire. But it's.
Do you mostly trade, or do you buy stuff too?
I trade with my friends' work, and I buy other art, that I like to support. I just saw a show at Macarona, this artist Paul Lee, the new paintings that are like really, really, really beautiful. Would like to have one of those. I don't know. Yeah.
Peter, Brant, and Colen, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.